We have now one last presentation of a project which is SmartProtein, one of the founding members of the Horizon for Proteins Cooperation. And this is Jacqueline Lyons from University College of Cork in Ireland. And she holds a PhD in nutrition science with a focus on food portion sizes and diet quality. And yeah, I give the floor to you.
Thank you very much. So hi everybody, I'm Jacqueline Lyons, I'm from Cork in Ireland. So I'm going to talk about SmartProtein. And then at the end of that presentation, I'm just going to briefly talk through a couple of policy actions as well, which are connected to a joint policy brief that some of the Horizon for Proteins partners are putting together. Okay, just looking at SmartProtein. So similar to the other projects here, it's a 10 million Horizon 2020 funded project in the alternative proteins area. It's a quite wide-ranging project in scope, but one of the main aims throughout it would be to look at the development of alternative protein ingredients and products. It's a 4.5-year project, so we have 9 months left on it. It's led by Emanuele Zanini at University College Cork in Ireland. And like most of the projects here, it's a large, diverse consortium, so 32 partners from 14 countries, industry, academia, and NGOs. So we've basically got 8 technical work packages and a project management and coordination work package. So because we are close to the end of our project, I just decided to pick kind of one key result from each of the work packages just to give you a sense of the work that's been ongoing. So work package 1 was a work package where we had agronomists and they grew 4 different protein crops, which were chickpea, quinoa, fava bean and lentil. And they grew them using organic regenerative agricultural techniques at 7 different pilot farms across Europe. So in Ireland, Portugal, Poland, other places as well. And they looked at how the different protein crops grew with respect to yield and their resistance to disease, etc. So the work package leader, I asked for his conclusions this week, and he said fava bean and chickpea are the species with the best potential to produce organic protein in Europe, he feels. He also said that breeding of these protein crop species, our 4 chosen ones, need to target biotic stresses in particular to enhance their yield stability, so the attacks from pests and bacteria and fungi. And intercropping, so many different examples of this were used within this work package, but he gave the example of lentils plus oats. Intercropping will enhance farm resilience in regenerative agricultural systems. He said in terms of lessons learned, during this project and with all of the growing trials, that regenerative organic farming is challenging. However, he sees it as part of the solution to climate change variability and acknowledges that protein crops provide more food in drought conditions. So with all of the variability in climatic conditions that we see, if you were to experience a lot of drought conditions going forward, that protein is actually well produced. Beans, for example, do well in drought conditions. In terms of opportunities, he feels that under pressure for consumers and with the new Common Agricultural Policy, this work package has observed increasing interest among farmers for protein crops. So that's interesting and positive to see that there seems to be a move towards diversifying, I guess, farming crops and things. Okay, so work package 2 then was all about plant protein processing and side stream upcycling. So it was looking at, again, the same 4 protein crops that we focus on in this project, so chickpea, lentil, quinoa, fava bean. And it was looking at what you could do in terms of processing fractions of these proteins, particularly in terms of side stream upcycling. So basically looking at byproducts from pasta making, brewing, and baking industries, from those 3 industries in particular, and looking at what you could do with some of the protein fractions plus some of those side streams. So this is result here from some sensory testing that was done recently on vegan nuggets, which have been prepared by one of the partners. The nuggets were basically based on pasta residues which were fermented. So this was done, you can see on the left there, you can follow the different sort of scale up of it. But basically, I suppose in the initial screening phase, there would have been various different mycelial things that would have been screened in terms of sort of the ones with the most potential in terms of taste and taking them forward into an ingredient. So they did find some things that seemed to be quite usable, scaled them up and are now at the point of making these sort of food prototypes and getting them to do internal sensory testing, which is very positive. And then the third work package was a little bit similar. It's called food processing, and it's about looking at, again, these 4 protein crops that we have, breaking them down into their different fractions and seeing whether they could be used in food products. So an example of one interesting food product that's being explored here would be infant formula using lentil protein isolate. But just to show a result here, this is a recently published study from this work package. And they took fava bean and they looked at the various technofunctional characteristics of fava bean protein isolates and their production side streams. So when they broke the fava bean into these different sort of component parts and looked at the side streams that are associated with that, they looked at this in terms of potential food applications and wrote a paper based on where they believe each of these fava bean fractions would best be placed in terms of product development. Work package 4 is about food, nutrition and health. One of the things that's going on in this work package is that we're just about to launch a human intervention study. The study is going to take people who are very fit and who go to the gym typically, and it's going to ask them to take basically either animal protein, plant protein or a placebo over time, over this kind of prescribed exercise regime, to look at the effect of the different protein types on muscle repair, muscle recovery, and also on markers of inflammation and also on the gut microbiota. So at the moment, we have sort of devised, or the people in this work package have devised, I suppose, the what they will need to feed the participants in this study. So they have a combination of pasta, crackers and beverages that they'll provide to them. And in terms of the plant protein, they're using lentil protein isolate coming from the project. So that'll be interesting to see what results come through on that. Work package 5 then is exploitation and business development, and we're at the end of the project, so it's good to see that there are some positive outcomes, I think, in this work package. I suppose can't say much either, but in terms of some business cases, so this work package would be assisting certain companies within the project with business cases, particularly when it comes to new ingredients that they might have developed that might be of use going forward. They're also helping with commercialization strategies for companies that might be a bit further on with new product development and have meat and fish analogues kind of in a good state. And also they would help with sustainability strategies, particularly for the partners who are trying to create things using side streams. So they've got a very circular process there already. So this team is helping them with their sustainability strategies. In terms of work package 6, then, this is all about consumer studies. One of the key results from this would have been a report that was published in 2021, and it's available on the SmartProtein website, based on results from a big pan-European survey. And the survey was run across 10 or 12 countries, and it had thousands of responders. And it was looking at people's own self-reported views, attitudes, beliefs around plant-based diets, alternative proteins and that kind of thing. So it was a big survey, and one of the key findings was that 46% of the people there said that they identified as being flexitarian, or that they were actively trying to reduce their meat consumption, which was a big statistic. And interestingly, this same survey has been repeated in China this year within our project. So at the moment, they're just about to start analysing results from China, and then ultimately we'll compare the results, and it'll be very interesting to see, in another huge population such as China, whether it bears any resemblance to what we saw here among the European consumers. So work package 7 then is dissemination and communication. We're lucky that we have a really good partner here, ProVeg International, based in Berlin, so they're very good. Our project website name is down there on the bottom left if you want to check it out, but there's always lots of different blog articles about different things being included there on the website. We also have a list of our scientific publications on the website. So at the moment, we've 14 listed there, and we aim to have 24 completed before the end of the project. But I can say with certainty it'll be absolutely 24, if not more, the way they're flying at the moment. And then we've lots of media mentions as well. So these are some of the ones that have come around in the last couple of months. So our dissemination team keeps us kind of abreast of this as well. And then the final technical work package would be sustainability assessment. So this is very important because one of the fundamental aims of the project would be to produce things that are, or to produce products and ingredients that are affordable, that are tasty, and that are sustainable. So we need to make sure that when you're producing something that it is sustainable. If you look at it in a whole life cycle way from its very origins right through to consumption and disposal at the end of the life cycle. So some results that were shared here for this meeting by our sustainability work package would be, if you look on the left there, these are results for the ecological impacts of 1 kg of organic protein crop farming. Again, looking at those 4 crops that we featured in this project, so fava beans, lentils, chickpea and quinoa, and they found that fava bean has got the least ecological impact. And then on the right-hand side here, these are results for ecological impacts of tempeh powder, both of these diagrams, based on different substrates. Again, the 4 protein crops that were involved within this project. So they found that in the top diagram there, if you were to look at the ecological impacts based on a mass basis, there's not much difference between any of the 4. But on the lower picture there, if you were to look at them based on a protein content basis, then you'd conclude again that fava bean has the lowest ecological impact. So fava bean is coming out as a very strong champion, I think, in this project. Okay, so just before I move on to talking a bit about the policy brief, are there questions on SmartProtein?
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. Thank you. I was just wondering on work package 1, is there any plan either as part of the project or after the project to help disseminate that information to farmers? Is that something you've considered?
Yeah, it's a good question. When I saw Valpro Path there, I took a photo of them and they're going to make a database. So we have all this data and the work package leaders have agreed to make it publicly available on a database because we're always pushing for kind of open access. It definitely will be. It's one of those things of just getting somebody to commit to putting an imperfect database up there and just to refine it into something. So there'll definitely be an open data set available for sure. And in fact, if you were to follow the project, you know, either the website probably we have a publications list, it'll be listed there. As to whether they're planning to publish, I don't know, publish scientific papers, I'm not sure within that work package, but I agree it's very important to make it available to farmers, you know, particularly in the different countries where these pilot trials were. It's very interesting. So yeah, hopefully we'll share a lot of it.
Hi, I was just wondering, how did you decide on the alternative protein sources you chose, and why were there no types of algae?
I can't answer that actually because I wasn't involved in the setup of the project and I'm just managing it. Because the agronomy work package is very strong and because these would be probably crops that they have experience with academically and things, I'd imagine that maybe was part of the basis. But I'm not sure. It's a good question.
Okay. It's going to be a very quick one. Is it on? Okay, yeah. Why did you choose China for repeating the consumer study?
I think partly because there's a link with China. So one of our team has a sort of a joint academic position between Ireland and China, and has that link. So he went there in the summer holidays this year and also launched a survey, collected the data. So I think it was probably an opportunistic, amplification of what we could do based on that connection. But it will be very interesting, I think, just to see. I asked him informally, and he said already he feels it's quite a different mindset over there in terms of plant-based, so it'll make for an interesting kind of comparison.
Thank you.
Okay. How much time, how many minutes have we left for? I can make it 5. Perfect. Yep, that's fine. Okay. So the next few slides then are moving on from SmartProtein. And before we have a break, and before we move into the policy section of the afternoon, I was just going to highlight a couple of points here that come up in a joint policy brief that some of the Horizon for Protein projects have been putting together. So I just want to try to explain the context of this. I suppose when Horizon for Proteins was the 4 original projects, so it was SmartProtein, Next Gen Proteins, Susan Jane, and ProFuture, we engaged with the Horizon Results Booster service of the European Commission. And one of the things, we got to choose from a menu of things we'd get help with, and we said we'd get a policy brief, assistance with a policy brief. So we did that. So we got some help and we put together a policy brief, which was really in a draft form, by the time that they'd finished engaging with us. That draft policy brief would be quite close to SmartProtein's own policy brief. So we did kind of take a lot of the original content, distill it down from the SmartProtein policy brief, which is a much more comprehensive document that was published in May of this year, and that's available online. So ours is a much more brief version, more concise. So we did take it to COP27 last year. There was a session we're invited to there, kind of a side event, and we did present the draft policy brief there as well for some feedback. But basically, just, I suppose, I probably shouldn't have moved the slide on. What I wanted to say was that I guess five of the Horizon for Proteins projects now, so the first 4 original projects, plus Like a Pro, are authors on this policy brief. ValProPath and Giant Leaps are not authors on it. They want to kind of create their own specific policy briefs. We're really, really open to feedback on it. So any points that stand out here as being totally off, we'd really like to know, because this isn't yet published, but we hope to publish it really, really soon, like maybe even next week, so that it can be an output for the projects who are finishing up this month. So that's the context. So we're here for some kind of final input from people. So in the policy brief, we just start by outlining the challenging context that the EU food systems landscape is facing, these various challenges that everybody will be familiar with. And then we sort of propose that alternative proteins could be a possible mitigating factor or a potential solution to some of these issues. We then go on to say that I suppose the current regulatory framework that exists isn't always positive when it comes to supporting the alternative protein sector, and that more could be done to make it a friendlier place, I guess, to launch these kind of companies and to make these choices easier for consumers as well. So how to create a positive policy framework then. So in our policy brief, we list 5 different points, which are listed here. And under each of them, we kind of have a suggestion for change or a suggested action in terms of, policy tweaks that we would like to see. But we do point out that a lot of the existing framework is already very good, and that these would be tweaks, really, if anything, just small changes that we could make to enhance the landscape. So really, really quickly, the first one is looking at labelling and marketing standards, and particularly we talk about the Food Information to Consumer 2016 regulation, which is very important and includes loads of information for consumers and food labels. 2 little points there. The second one is that it would be nice to also include some element of sustainability on food labels. So we have to put on the nutrition information, we have to put on the ingredients, the allergens. Is a time to include something by law that has to be there on sustainability. There's lots of different ways you could approach that, but it would be good to include that as a kind of an official feature at this point. The other smaller point there is that there may be room within this regulation to include definitions of vegan and vegetarian food products that are very clearly defined, and I think this has been suggested, I think, by the European Commission at some point as well, that it should be probably included within this regulation. So that's just another small point there. It would help food producers, might help consumers too. Second point is in relation to public food procurement. There's a lot of food publicly procured across the EU every day. The whole point here being that if you could kind of, if you could sort of make this a slightly more sustainable, maybe more plant-based, to include some alternative proteins, if it could look a little bit more like that, then you could have a really big effect, because when you think of all the tons of food every day that are publicly procured, for example, in the EU, if you could make a change in that, you could have a really, really big impact without actually asking consumers to do anything. So this could be a really, really strong one. The World Health Organization has commented that this is like an under-tapped resource, like this should definitely be used, to tweak our food environment. Okay, so there is a public procurement regulation in the EU. So anybody who's tendering for, a catering company, for example, they have to refer to this regulation, but price is still the main criterion. So we would be suggesting here that there would be something within this public procurement regulation to do with sustainability, without maybe saying exactly what that should be. Like maybe it should be a minimum amount of plant-based foods included. Maybe that's not the way to do it, but that there should be some sort of element of sustainability put into this regulation, so that when the tenders are put out, that people are obliged to kind of meet this criteria and to be good in terms of sustainability. A smaller point within it then is to have another look at the organic foods regulation from 2007 and to see whether fortified plant-based foods could not be eligible for organic certification, because at the moment something that's fortified can't be considered something that can be organically certified. But then if there were organic requirements, I guess, within the sustainability part of the public food procurement directive, then this might be a barrier then to including plant-based foods if they couldn't meet the organic kind of objectives there, if that makes sense. The next one is about tax. So taxes in general are a national matter for each of the EU countries, but that's a little bit different when it comes to VAT. VAT is regulated through EU directives. Okay, this is about, I suppose, sometimes when you have like a plant-based product versus it's a dairy product. So for example, you have dairy milk and then you have maybe oat-based milk. Sometimes the VAT in certain European countries is much higher, like multiple times higher on the plant-based one than it is on the dairy one. So this is about looking at VAT rates and seeing whether anything can be done here to sort of make it a more level playing field. So since last year, I think member states can put a limit of 5% VAT on certain types of products. There's a list of these products, and sustainable plant-based whole foods would be included here. It's not mandatory to keep the VAT that low, but they can do it. But apparently not many countries really are doing that. So what might be nice to see here would be EU-wide maximum equal VAT rates for plant-based products and animal-sourced foods, meaning that if you say, okay, 5% VAT, for example, is the most that we can put on something that has a plant-based and a traditional equivalent, so that you can't have the situation where oat-based milk, in Italy, like has a very, very, very high VAT rate. So you can't have that situation where it becomes a more equal VAT situation. You could further encourage member states to establish 0% VAT rates for plant-based whole foods in a bid to encourage their consumption among consumers. And you could try to have plant-based products included in the list of specifics, goods and services that are benefiting from EU VAT reduced rates. So I don't know enough about tax to get any further into this at all, but I guess there are ways to sort of to tweak the VAT rules there, maybe to sort of try to benefit the plant-based whole foods. Nearly there. So this one is about just certain support measures that we could include, including some to do with research. One would be to have another look maybe at the EU's agricultural promotion policy and to include plant and alternative-based alternative protein-based food innovations here to see if these products could be also considered eligible for promotion under the agricultural promotion programme. Another one, and it came up today a little bit as well, was just to sort of look at the CAP again in the framework of national rural development programmes. And as people said here earlier, you know, local farmers in Ireland are not going to diversify without, you know, a strong incentive to do so. So maybe just taking like more time to look at this and to see what exactly needs to be done to help these farmers to diversify into other types of farming. Okay, and then there's a point here about, you know, potentially more of the European Commission funding could go towards plant-based and alternative protein innovation, since this area still has to significantly develop. And then very lastly, and again it's been mentioned earlier, but our very last point in the policy brief is about revising the novel foods regulation. One of the big problems with it is that it's sort of a barrier to innovation in some senses, because it's such a cumbersome, long, expensive, difficult process to get through. So I see it in our project, people are terrified of having a novel ingredient because it's the last thing they want to do, is to have to go through this process. So it would be interesting to look at this as well and to see what can be done to streamline this process or to bring it in line with what the innovators need. So I think we're coming back after coffee to talk more about that.